we're gonna just chit chat. Hey, everybody, we're just gonna chit chat here for a couple minutes while people filter into the room. I'll keep an eye on that. So this is Dr. Ashish Jha. I'm trying to gesture downward. He's down on me. I don't know where he is on everybody else's tic-tac-toe board. And we are incredibly grateful to him for joining us. It's nice to have an actual real expert here with us. Those are always the most fun shows. Dr. Jha, I don't know if you know this, but
I'm here every week. I'm here every week, JBL.
Thanks,
I don't know.
I was very nearly a doctor. I was this close to getting into medical school. So it was, you know, I won't hold any of this against you, so long as you were not sitting on the admissions committee at Brown when I was rejected from Brown. And
no, I've been at Brown for like 96. A year. So
good.
If you had any interaction with Brown more than a year ago, not on me.
Excellent. Excellent. Tim, Amanda, how are you guys doing? Amanda, did you survive first day of school?
I did. Well, you know, the second day is harder because the first day is a half day. And so today they had the full day and then they went to their karate class and were extremely cranky. I mean, there was like people slamming doors. And so I'm happy to not be doing bedtime. So thank you for Thursday Night Bulwark. My husband, good luck.
It is really loud here in Oakland. We've got some street work, and I think people are doing wheelies out there, and we had to turn the fan on because it's the one day all year that it's not perfectly 72 degrees here in Oakland, and I've got a child and a husband on a conference call, so I might occasionally be on mute, you know, just for everybody's experience. But it's a pleasureful joy here in Oakland, but maybe not so much for the listener.
Excellent. Okay, so we're gonna keep I'm looking at the numbers are pretty good so far. I'm gonna keep our little green room time here slightly shorter than normal. Normally give it about 5 minutes. Dr. Jha is with us till the 8:30 break, the end of our A block, and then we will hop off and talk about other things, but I want to maximize his time. Dr. Ashish Jha, who is Dean of the School of Public Health up at Brown, the hippest and coolest of all the Ivies.
True.
Yeah, it is true, right? It's where everybody really wants to go, honestly.
Especially your name, JBL.
Anyway, so things are going great. America just, you know, we have licked this COVID thing. It's awesome. I wrote a little bit about COVID today for my newsletter, and I was going through and looking at some of the state daily average of deaths, and noticed that they are, you know, in Florida now higher than they were during the darkest days of the winter. So I guess if I could just put a quarter in the machine here and get you to explain in the very highest level, where are we right now?
Yeah. So let me start off by saying we are in a place I did not expect us to be 4 months ago. If we were sitting here 4 months ago, I would have laid out for you why we're going to have a good summer and have a great summer, and that there are going to be pockets of challenges in the fall and winter, but that the worst of the pandemic was behind us. I still think the worst of the pandemic is behind us, but I say that with a lot less confidence than I did 4 months ago. So what went wrong beyond just it's hard to predict the future when it comes to a pandemic? Two things, really, and actually arguably three, one of which will lead into talking about boosters, if you want to talk about boosters at some point. One is the Delta variant. Look, it is way worse version of this virus than any of us saw coming. Of course, there's lots of people now who tell you, oh, I saw this coming. All right, you're a genius, because most of us did not expect a version of the virus that is this much more contagious than the prior versions. It really is extraordinary how much more contagious this is. Second, I have to say, given the horrible year we had, I did not expect a third of Americans to decide that they're going to pass on the vaccines. And a third of people who are eligible have just decided they don't want the vaccine. And we can talk about what the reason behind that is. And then the third, which is a complex issue, and we can talk about it, is a little more waning immunity from the vaccines than I was hoping for 6 months ago. And put all those three things together, and here we are, 150,000 infections a day right now. That's where we are averaging more than 1,000 deaths a day. And things are not done. Like the next month, 2 are going to be pretty tough. There is some evidence that things in the South are starting to peak. Louisiana has clearly come down from its highs. A lot of disagreement among experts about whether Florida has peaked and started coming down, or whether we're going to see more challenges in Florida in the weeks ahead. But a lot of the country still has some room to go on Delta. So the next few weeks, next month, it's just going to be hard. And we're going to go into a fall and winter with a lot of people infected, a lot of people sick. And the Northeast, how vulnerable the Northeast is to this winter is going to be driven in large part by how we handle vaccines over the next couple of months.
All right, there are two guys, Tim and Amanda, I'll turn everything over to you, but there are two other questions that I want to throw out to the good doctor before we get too far down. The first is, are we seeing any movement on the case fatality rate? It had seemed after we figured out best practices, it had seemed the clinicians really, got their heads around what gold standard treatment looked like. It looked like it was at 1.6%, I think. And then it stayed there for a real long time. Have we seen any movement on that? Or is it just kind of like one of those iron laws just sitting there hanging around our necks?
It's hanging around. And this is an area of much debate. So if you look at the UK, their case fatality rate, and by the way, just so everybody knows, case fatality rate is cases and deaths. We all understand that there's a bunch of infections that we miss. So it's not the infection fatality ratio. It's correct. The case fatality ratio. In the UK, the case fatality rate is about 0.2, 0.3%. But the US is still hanging out at about 1.3, 1.5. Remember, you always have to do a 3-week lag between cases today and look at deaths 3 weeks earlier. And that is crazy because you would think that should not be happening for one reason. We have vaccinated a vast majority of our elderly, and therefore case fatality rates should plummet. That's what happened in the UK. So quite a bit of debate about what's going on. My personal theory is not just a theory. This is what the way I see the data is that we have 20 to 25%, 20%, let's say, of elderly Americans who are not fully vaccinated, and they're not randomly distributed, right? They are in certain communities, in certain states, and those are the places where Delta is ripping through those places and getting a lot of elderly people very, very sick and killing them. And versus the UK, where that number is not 80%, it's 95% or 93% of elderly are fully vaccinated. So that, I think, explains a large part of the difference. I don't think this virus has gotten meaningfully more deadly, maybe marginally. There's some evidence, but I think most of it is we just still have a good number of elderly who are vulnerable to this disease.
Yeah, and these things can be, these numbers can be affected by the local distributions, right? I mean, if you have 30% of the country unvaccinated, that's bad. But that's going to be much less bad than having some places at 80 and some places at 50, right? Because those 50s are going to be little petri dishes and really bad. Okay, and the last thing I was going to ask is just how does what we've seen here compare to what we're seeing internationally? Are we seeing fourth waves everywhere? What does it look like elsewhere? And are there meaningful differences that tell us something that we can learn from?
Yeah, I think when you look internationally, the one country that's a bit funny is Israel. And I want to talk about Israel because it's funny in some really interesting ways and it's teaching us a lot. But UK is doing better than we are. They had a spike, but they've come down, but their vaccination numbers are up. One of the most interesting countries to me is Germany. Germany is now more vaccinated than us. Their infection numbers are way below ours on a per capita basis. And I think it's largely driven by the fact that Germany has just ubiquitous testing, and testing is everywhere. Literally, you go to the pool and there's a little testing site right outside the pool and everybody goes and tests themselves before they go into the public pools. It's just a very different mindset, and all that testing picks up enough infections so you're stopping large outbreaks. Canada also has infection numbers that are under reasonable control because they've done a very good job on vaccinations. Let's talk about Israel, because to me, Israel has been so interesting in this disease. They did a phenomenal job, as everybody knows, vaccinating people in December and January, and got a large chunk of their population vaccinated in January. And they look like the success story. Everything opened up, things looked great. until they didn't. Then infections numbers started rising. First, it was largely in unvaccinated people. Then it was in vaccinated people. So how do we understand Israel? Because Israel has also, by the way, become a major talking point for the misinformationists who keep saying, see, these vaccines don't work. The vaccines are actually working just fine in Israel. If you ask the question, if you're a vaccinated person in Israel today, what is your likelihood of having severe illness that lands you in the hospital? It's about 90% less than if you're an unvaccinated person in Israel. That's probably the metric we care most about. And that metric is still hanging in there. But what we are seeing is a lot of breakthroughs in Israel. And these breakthroughs are happening 6 to 7 months after the second shot. This is the whole booster conversation and has persuaded many of us, including me, that we need to be thinking about boosters a bit more aggressively than I was thinking several months ago. And a lot of the infections in Israel are happening because there are people who are having breakthrough infections because they got vaccinated so early. We haven't seen that in other countries because they got vaccinated later. And there's also some reason to believe that spacing out first and second doses may prevent the kind of waning immunity that you see when the two doses are very closely together. Israel and America are the two countries that gave doses very, very closely together. So we really probably have to look to Israel for our future and say, how do we do better?
Okay, I have a lot of questions from readers in the audience about boosters that we'll get to later. But Tim and Amanda, please, I give the floor over to you.
I want to talk more later about what proper ventilation and testing regimes would look like in schools, because I feel like everybody's hung up on the masks, and those are two important components. But I wanted to ask you about something you were writing about on Twitter and how Sturgis was sort of a case study for what could come later. You pointed out there that about 70% of the population there was vaccinated, but then they had a mass rally, and now cases are up for the population. And so what I'm wondering, because I'm not sure we're ever going to get above 70% in many areas. And so what does that look like long term? Yep. And it seems to me, if only, and I'm not a doctor, of course, I'm just speculating, if the elderly population is most likely to get vaccinated, are we teaching this thing to mutate among the younger population? And what does that foretell for the years to come, not just, fall and winter?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about Sturgis and South Dakota. South Dakota to me has been the most interesting state in 2021. The state I actually look at probably more than any other. And you may be thinking, why are you obsessed with South Dakota? What's going on? The reason I'm obsessed with South Dakota is because I believe that South Dakota and probably Vermont are the two states with the highest levels of population immunity. Let's be clear about what I mean by population immunity. It's a combination of both people who've been previously infected and people who've been vaccinated. Vaccination levels in South Dakota are pretty national average, maybe slightly below, but they have had a ton of infections. My best estimate is 50 to 60% of South Dakotans have been infected with the virus. Throw that in with 50% population having been vaccinated, and you're probably, I think, between 75 and 80% population immunity. That's really high. And so when Sturgis happened this year, I thought, first of all, my question in my head was, if you have that level of population immunity, can you get away with Sturgis and not cause a big outbreak? And Sturgis, to be very clear, it's not the outdoor rallies that I care about, it's all the bars and all the stuff that happens in the evenings and at night, right? And the short answer, so that's what I wondered about 3 weeks ago. And I wrote this thread saying, I'm wondering about this. And then I wrote a thread last night basically saying, okay, the data's in. There's been a 600% increase in infection rates in South Dakota in the last 3 weeks. And it's basically because at 75 to 80%, you can't do what's happened at Sturgis. So there are 2 or 3 explanations in my mind. And to your question, Amanda, of like, what does this mean for the long run? Because that's why it's interesting. I mean, it's not just a South Dakota story. It's what does life look like a year from now, right? Can we have large gatherings? And to me, there are 2 or 3 lessons. One is it's possible, and I believe this is true, that since so much of the South Dakota immunity comes from natural infections and not from vaccinations, and I believe that the data leans towards vaccination-induced immunity being better than natural immunity, that may be part of the explanation. That if you're at 75 to 80% by by vaccinations, you might do better. Second, Sturgis is a pretty serious stress test. That's like 500,000 people, 2 weeks, a lot of hanging out, no masking. I'm guessing a lot of people who showed up at Sturgis probably were not vaccinated, and that it just didn't work. I do think there are ways that you can have large gatherings. And they are, I mean, Lollapalooza happened and we didn't see a big outbreak because they required vaccinations or a negative COVID test. If you can do things like that, which obviously would not have happened at Sturgis, but if you can do things like that, you can have large gatherings. Here's my last point, which I think is probably the most important point for people to understand, is because people often say, well, how does this all play out? How does this all end? Let me tell you how I think this all ends. All of us, vaccinated or unvaccinated, are going to encounter the Delta variant up close and personal. And the question is, are you going to encounter it as a vaccinated person or are you going to encounter it as an unvaccinated person? I remain very confident that we will get to 80, 90% population immunity. The problem is a lot of us are going to get there through infections, and it's going to cause a lot of suffering and a lot of death. And I would, of course, much prefer we got to 90% through vaccinations. But the Delta variant is not going to let people kind of skate by. It is so contagious. It's so widespread. So I think we should be prepared for the fact that we are going to get to communities with 80, 90% population immunity. I'm just worried that we're going to do it the old-fashioned way, and it's going to be really painful.
Hey, Dr. Jha, thank you so much for doing this. So I have related questions, one from a random person I heard on the street, which is I know how most people get their COVID news. And then the other is a related question from my my good friend who's an infectious disease doctor and prepped me to ask you this one. The rando on the street said he's worried about the booster shots because it's going to create another new powerful infection or alternatives such as Delta, right? Like that there is this concern that the boosters, this might have been from a forward email chain or not, but I feel like lots of people get those sorts of things. So it's good to ask the experts. Related though, my friend who is dealing with this is, and you know, who's dealing with overwhelmed New Orleans hospitals right now, is concerned about Lambda, doesn't know, you know, he says there's a lot of uncertainty about it out there. And I'm just curious what your thought on that is.
So one of the things that a lot of folks are spreading is this idea that vaccines are somehow selecting for more contagious variants. They are not. And I'll give you, when the Alpha variant got created, it was in the UK when there were no vaccines. Delta started in India when 1% of the population was vaccinated. Like, these variants do not start and spread because of selection pressure from vaccines. That is a common statement. It's just not true. Vaccines actually reduce replication of these viruses and do not create variants. They actually dampen variants. So a booster shot is not going to set up a more dangerous variant. It actually will reduce the likelihood because it's going to reduce breakthrough infections, and therefore it will reduce the likelihood that we're going to see new variants. New variants basically happen because there are large outbreaks among unvaccinated people. To your friend's question about Lambda, let me make one broad point, and then I'll talk about the Lambda specifically. We should absolutely expect more variants. They are going to rise in places around the world. We may run through the entire Greek alphabet. And then we're going to have to think about, like, where do we go next? But we're going to see lots and lots of variants. I am not super worried about most of them. There was a Delta Plus that started in India recently, and everybody freaked out. And then when you look at the data, it actually probably turns out to be a Delta minus. Like, it's probably a little less dangerous. And then it has petered out. Lambda started in Peru, or it was identified in Peru first, has spread through a large part of Latin America. It has some deletions that are concerning for immune escape. I think, this is now like speculation, that there is a trade-off that the virus cannot mutate indefinitely. It has problems the more it mutates with fitness. And it probably has a little bit of a trade-off between its ability to escape our immune system and its contagiousness. And therefore, I am not super worried that we are going to see a virus that can outcompete Delta and escape our immune system and our vaccines. I'm not saying it won't happen. Like, look, none of us want to be super confident about the future of the evolution of this virus. But I am at this moment not worried about Lambda. The data I've seen so far suggests that our vaccines will hold up fine. We'll get more data. And then if it turns out that I'm wrong, I'll be happy to come back and tell you guys why. But so far, I'm feeling okay about that.
Hey, I've just got one more really quick one. We've all, and then JVL, we can turn into the guys. So we've all got kids. This wasn't on my question list, but you know, your comment there about how 80 to 90% of us are going to encounter the virus. That doesn't scare me. For me, really, I'm vaccinated. Like that scares me for my 3.5-year-old just a little bit. So like, what are the thoughts about vaccines for kids, about precautions? If we're presuming that it's going to be 80 to 90%, should I be have more caution than I do at the moment about my child? Should I not?
Yeah, great question. I have a 9-year-old who's not vaccinated. So a couple of things about how to think about kids, and then how to think about when vaccines are coming. Kids, young kids particularly, get infected from adults in their lives. That's the main source of infection. And the best way to think about this is my 9-year-old is unvaccinated. The average 9-year-old in Florida is unvaccinated. The average 9-year-old in Florida has about 15 times the risk of getting infected right now. Infection rates in Florida for young kids is about 15 times higher than it is in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. It's not because their vaccination rates for kids are any different. They're all 0%. It's that the adults around them are unvaccinated. So the best thing you can do for your 3.5-year-old is make sure that the adults and older kids are vaccinated. My 9-year-old plays with a lot of other 9-year-olds. They're all unvaccinated, but all their parents and all the people in their lives are largely vaccinated. So if you really are concerned about your kid, make sure that they're hanging out with other kids whose parents and family members are vaccinated. Now, the big question is, when are vaccines coming for kids under 12? I'm going to say that I'm sorry that for 3.5, it may be a little longer. I do think the next group is 5 to 11. This has been a source of a lot of frustration to many of us because the FDA is not being super clear and transparent. Over 24 hours, I was on TV saying, I think it's going to be late September. Tony Fauci was on TV saying it'll be before Christmas. And Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, was saying it'll probably be sometime early next year. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, why are we all just making this stuff up? I'll give you my case for why it's end of September, but none of us should be guessing. And so there's a really nice letter that Ro Khanna and Katie Porter, and signed by 102 members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, sent to the FDA and said, look, we don't want to put pressure on you to like do something before it's ready, but can you give us a timeline of what data do you have? When do you expect more data? And like, walk us through when we should expect this so we can plan accordingly. So you don't have random people saying it's going to be next year, it'll be 2023, it'll be September. Like, those are meaningfully different things. Talking to folks at Pfizer and like reading the tea leaves, I think it's going to be end of September that the data is going to be submitted. Sometime in mid-October, I think my 9-year-old is going to be able to get vaccinated. But I'm guessing. I want to stop guessing. I want to hear from the FDA.
On that point of like, because they may just drop this decision and everybody has, 2 days to react. How should school administrators handle that when it happens? But then I also want you to speak to, I think, my school does a great job about masking, but I hear no one talk about testing and what ventilation should look like. I do not know what a ventilated classroom should look like. If you could just walk us through that. And also for the testing part, like what should parents have on hand in the house? Like I got a couple over the counter tests, but at what point do I need to go get a real test? Like I really follow this and I still have no idea how to test myself and my family.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm going to punt on your question for just 15 seconds to say, like, one of the ways in which I think the Biden administration has really dropped the ball is what's going on with testing. And again, I will point to a country like Germany. In Germany, antigen tests are 99 cents, or 95 cents or something. I guess euro cents. But the point is, they're a buck, right? They're a buck, and they're ubiquitous. And the reason why a buck is important is if you go to buy Binax now at CVS, it's about 12 to 15 bucks. At 12 to 15 bucks, many of us can afford a few of them, but very few people can afford to do it like 3 or 5 times a week, right? And you want to have these tests widely available, cheap, easy, and the payoff is Germany's infection numbers are literally 1/4 of what they are in the United States. These things are awesome. They should be widely available. And then there are these other tests that are more like 30, 40, 50 bucks. We've had the technology for antigen tests since last May. And I thought the Trump administration totally blew it on not making these things widely available. And I don't understand what's going on in the Biden team. I talked to the Biden White House, and they are not taking testing seriously. Okay, now I'm going to come to your question about what should be happening in schools. I sit on our local town school medical advisory committee, and we have laid out a very clear, detailed.
That's intimidating to the other people on the advisory committee.
No, it's a good committee.
Jim, who's like a football coach, is on the committee.
So we've laid out basically, and again, I tweeted about like our plan, and the plan is linked, and I'm like, anybody should look at our plan and see what we wrote out. But basically, we said there are 4 things that are really critical for getting kids back to school safely. You've mentioned them. One of them is vaccines. I was pushing for a vaccine mandate. Our town basically was like, back off. So we say strongly encourage vaccines for everybody. I believe very strongly 12 to 17-year-olds should get vaccinated. And then I think for 18 and above, staff, teachers it should be a vaccine mandate. Second is ventilation. There's a lot that's been written about ventilation, Amanda, and I can send you like reports that we've been involved in and others. They're very good ways of measuring the quality of ventilation. It's really about air exchange and air change kind of per hour, air changes per hour. CO2 levels in the room are a really good marker. There's been very, very good work done on this. And by the way, if there's any school district that tells you they can't do this, it's nonsense. They have billions of dollars. Well, every school district doesn't have billions of dollars, but billions of dollars have been given. And most of this stuff is pretty cheap. You can make any room in any school super well ventilated by buying like air cleaners from Amazon for $100. So like, again, it's nonsense when schools say we can't do this. So ventilation upgrades, I think, are very, very doable. Third is testing. I believe once a week testing for everybody in school is a great strategy. People are like, what kind of testing? Pool testing is fine. Antigen testing is fine. If you want to do standard PCR testing, it's probably much more expensive, but it's fine. I don't think it's critical. But again, there are lots of ways of doing it. And then I do think masking is really important, particularly in high risk areas. You do all 4 of those things, I'm comfortable sending my kids back to school, including my 9-year-old who's not vaccinated.
All right, so I want to talk boosters here, but before we run to booster talk, I just want to jump to the other end of the age spectrum real quickly, because this is a question I got. So even if you have elderly folks in your life who, even if they are vaccinated, how concerned should you be about what a breakthrough infection can do for them? So
yeah, it's a very good question and very personal. Because just like I have a 9-year-old who's not vaccinated, my elderly parents are in their 80s, and I think a breakthrough infection could be really bad for them. And let me be very clear about how to think about breakthrough infections. And I know we're getting close on time, but can I take like 60 seconds and do a quick immunology lesson?
Please.
Very simple, because this is going to be really important for people to understand so you can counter misinformation. The way to think about what vaccines do, what immunology kind of generally does, is vaccines generate 2 arms of your immune response. And the simple way to think about this is they have your active forces and your reserves, okay? Active forces are the antibodies, reserves are your memory B cells and your T cells. Okay, what happens is you get really high levels of antibodies after your second shot, and you get terrific reserves. Over time, the active forces decline. And so that's what we've learned from Israel. And so then when you have a super contagious virus show up like the Delta variant, it can overwhelm your active forces and cause a breakthrough infection. But you have your reserves, and the reserves kick in. Your B cells and your T cells, you're like, hey, I've seen this thing before. And they take over and they prevent you from having a severe illness. This is why prevention of hospitalizations and deaths remains very, very, very high for all of us who've been vaccinated, even if your antibodies wane. So if you're about waning antibodies, it means more breakthrough infections. It does not mean more severe illness and death. Here's the kicker. If you are 85 and have heart failure and kidney disease, that breakthrough infection, which might be just kind of miserable for a couple of days for the average person, may land you in the hospital. So those are not vaccine failures. The vaccine is still working. It's just your body can't tolerate a breakthrough infection because you're old and frail. And so I think we should be worried about that. And given that those are the people who got vaccinated in December, January, and February, and they are now 6-7 months out, I think we should absolutely be thinking about moving towards boosters for them. So I think, immunocompromised is a no-brainer, but I think if you're frail and elderly, I think if you're a healthy 65-year-old, it's fine. Like you'd probably get a booster at some point, but I wouldn't go rush out and get one. But if you are 75, 80, if you have heart disease, you have kidney disease, it's probably worth getting that booster. And this is why I want the FDA to move faster on this, and the FDA and the CDC to say to people who are older, frail, at risk, hey, you may not tolerate a breakthrough infection very well. You probably need that booster shot.
All right, so the two booster questions I got a lot of from people were, one, if you got a Moderna, when you go to get a booster at 6 to 8 months, does it have to be a Moderna booster, or can you get a Pfizer and vice versa?
Okay, can I give you the official answer and then like the unofficial answer that I'm going to deny? I know this is being recorded, but I'll say it.
Sure.
So
It's just members. It's just members. Just between us.
Right, just among us close friends. No, look, the FDA is going to come out at some point and authorize boosters. They're going to say you should get the same booster. And that's because the study's being done by like Pfizer, for instance. Pfizer has done a study on boosters. Guess which booster they use for their people who got the first 2 doses? The Pfizer booster. The Pfizer booster is fine. So the FDA and the CDC are going to come out and tell you that you should get the same shot of the same third shot that you got. There are many of us who think, and again, I didn't say this, except I am saying this, you probably might do a little bit better if you got one of the other ones. So if you got Pfizer, you may do a little better. We think that there's an advantage to a little mixing and matching. Am I sure? I am not sure. Am I asking you all to defy the CDC and the FDA? No, because we should follow the CDC and the FDA. I wish I had stronger data. I wish the CDC would come out and say, and FDA would come out and say, it doesn't matter which booster you get. But I
feel like if you eat cookie dough, you mix and match.
Yeah, a little mix and matching is probably a bit better.
It's like the kid at the fountain drink, a little Coke, a little orange Fanta, a little
right?
Sprite.
Like it's a little tastier. It's a little tastier. The standard formula is just stay with the Coke. Throw a little Fanta in.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
Anyway,
question number 2 here was, as we run up into flu shot season, should people be thinking about spacing out, getting their COVID booster from their flu shot? Does it not matter at all?
We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. And here's how there are lots of vaccines that we get together, right? There's a bunch of vaccines, measles, mumps, rubella, and et cetera, where you can get multiple vaccines at once. So there's not like a fundamental problem. We've never tested giving COVID vaccines around
the Amazon nanobots and the Bill Gates nanobots in the vaccine.
They don't interact.
Fight if you get them too close together, right?
That's right. That's right. And the microchips in them, yes, will get confused. So my best guess is it probably doesn't matter, but I hate guessing. I want to see some data. And I'm guessing this not out of randomness. Again, I think there's plenty of reasons to believe it's probably fine. But I hope that there will be some data that the CDC and FDA can provide. Look, the other thing I will say to people is flu vaccines are arriving now. And so if you can vision yourself saying, okay, I might need a booster in a couple of months, it might be reasonable to go get the flu shot early this season so that you can space it out. But I don't think there's going to end up being a problem.
That's great. Dr. Jha, I cannot thank you enough for joining us. This was wonderful. I wanted very badly to title tonight's episode Jha Rules, but then I thought nobody would get it. And
we would all get it.
I get it.
I would have got it.
Really?
My
I might
dad,
sing the wrong song for it, but I would get it.
I think everything was A+, except I had one just brief second when you were talking about why you were so obsessed with South Dakota that we were going to have a Matt Walsh moment on the live stream. I was like,
no one here would have that moment. No.
Dr. Jha, thank you so much.
Thank you so
Happy
much.
back to school
really
for you
great.
and your family.
Thank you.
Best of luck. Keep fighting the good fight. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Stay well, everybody.
Really
Bye-bye.
great.
Yes. All right. While Dr. Jha hops off, I will quick thank you to my buddy Dan, Bulwark reader Dan, who went to a Mariners game and got me a Seattle Mariners game worn jersey. Thanks, Dan. Okay, so it's just the 3 of us now, and that went really well. And we have tons and tons of people here for it. Everybody's super enthusiastic. So let's talk about Afghanistan now. No, I'm kidding. Let's not talk. Let's not. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, can we just sort of recap a little bit first? A little green room.
We all know what's going on.
Post-game Dr. Jha? No, I just
Post-game Dr. Jha. It was
Jha.
that guy's the best.
No,
this is why I didn't get into medical school, because people who are doctors are real people. Jha ruled. Yeah. Now I'm having flashbacks to the fire festival vaccine stuff with Ja Rules. Did you guys watch the
It was so
documentaries on
good.
Fire
It was
Festival?
so good. It was so
Yeah.
good. Speaking of the festivals, the thing I liked the most about Dr. Ja is like he's not full of shit. You know what I mean? Like on stuff that you can do, and you could. I mean, like there aren't a lot of people on the MSNBC doctor circuit who are like, actually, the Sturgis outdoor part was fine. You know what I mean? Like he just sort of throws that out there. It's like it's the parties and all that. Like that's important context that like gets missed a lot of times and all that stuff. Like I thought his comments about the school ventilation to you were really
They're
good.
not spending their money.
Like really useful. I mean, he just is. There are a lot of folks that are out there right now, and they're all doing their best. And I appreciate all the public health folks, but like I just love his just straight to the point. Like sometimes he has bad news for you. Sometimes he has good news. I didn't love the fact that 80% of us are going to get Delta.
Yeah, well,
that was the biggest.
No, well, what was it? We're going to encounter it
fine.
one way or the other.
You may not even know you've got it. All right, so listen, I am watching the numbers drop as people literally go running out because nobody wants to talk about Afghanistan. So I guess Afghanistan isn't important, and so we shouldn't talk about it. So let's just all talk about how awful Donald Trump is or something. Sound good?
Donald Trump is awful. Donald Trump is really awful. I was working about writing something about him today, and I was talking about his aspic belly. I threw that, like, you got to find joy where you can.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, after like those gelatins that have like the little things inside of them, and like that I've kind of
aspic is like a Victorian spice.
I don't think that's right. We can have the chatter check that. No, he remains terrible. I believe he said today that that Osama bin Laden wasn't really a big deal compared to the terrorists he killed. I mean, he's a fucking nightmare. And this is, by the way, I know none of the reply guys on my Twitter, anytime I express displeasure with something that Joe Biden does, like, think I'm going back to Republicanism. Like what they're missing is like, he's so horrible that is why this is such high stakes.
Yep.
All this stuff is just high stakes. Yeah. And I hate, and we don't want to talk about politics on a day like today, but honestly, like the worse Biden looks, the more likely it is that he's going to run again, right? Not that like
or
whatever Ron DeSantis or whatever is going to be that much better, but like, still a little better. Like let's just be honest. Like Ron DeSantis is awful, but on a scale from 1 to 100, he's like a 3 bad, and Trump is like a negative 100. So like he's and the worse it does, the worse better for him. So I know you're joking that we can just talk about how bad he is, but he is really bad, and his badness is really relevant to the really fucking shitty day that we had today.
So, all right. So, I mean, I'm serious. We don't have, like, if the people listening to the show don't want to talk about Afghanistan, we don't have to. So, Amanda, what's happening with our friends in Arizona? Isn't there's something happening today? Was that?
Well, yeah. The strange thing that happened, and I'm trying to get a beat on it exactly, is that the Attorney General, Mark Brnovich, who is running for Senate, he wants to replace Mark Kelly. He dropped a press release on the Board of Supervisors in Maricopa County saying that, they better comply with whatever more materials that the Arizona Senate wants. And it's so hard to track because the Arizona Senate was asking for materials that they had already sent but couldn't find, and the Cyber Ninjas still haven't produced their report. But until I think now, the Attorney General has sort of stayed out of it, although he's been, playing footsie with Mark Levin and all those guys going on the broadcast. And so I think today was the day that Brnovich really got sucked in. And Doug Ducey, as I've been railing against, has been staying out of it completely. But that is a bad sign. Whether or not he's really coming down on the Board of Supervisors or not, I guess we could ask that question. But he is firing off press releases saying, you better comply with Karen Fann and whatever BS request she wants. So I take that as a bad development in light of the funny development that Cyber Ninjas can't produce any kind of report and are still calling in sick with COVID.
Yeah, that's not great. On the other hand, we did get the good news stuff with Sidney Powell and the legal fees, and Charlie's newsletter today was so great. It's like, what? There might be consequences for these people. That's kind of amazing. And I guess unexpected. I had just internalized the idea that we lived in a post consequences world where, if you're Jack Berkman and who's his little
Jacob
ego,
Wall. Yes, they
Jacob
got fined
Wall,
by the
that you could just
FEC.
Jacob
or
do whatever you
5 million?
want and nobody would ever say anything about it. And you're Rudy Giuliani, you can do whatever you want. Nobody would, these guys can get anything. They can do anything. And maybe not. We have the city pals gonna be forced to pay legal fees in some state
Michigan.
Right, Michigan, right?
The city of Detroit, actually, but they don't expect that'll be higher than six
And so it'll be
figures.
small,
The big
right?
dog is the Dominion suit, where she's being sued for
Right.
$1 billion.
And so is it
billion
possible? Is it possible the Dominion is going to exit this period in life no longer doing voting systems because they simply can't sell that, right? I mean, there's going to be half America where you will not be able to purchase their stuff, but instead there'll be a media empire because they will have taken over a bunch of conservative networks that they've won in judgments. And I don't know, you can just see them morphing into a totally different kind of company, which would be amazing.
I think they're just going to walk off with bags of money.
Between that and the Capitol Police Officer lawsuit, which looks like it is shaping up, or is it already been filed?
They, I think, filed it. There's 7 of them. They're suing Trump and 20 members of the other groups. What's interesting is that seemed to move in tandem for me with the request for documents by the January 6th committee. You saw that big sweeping request they made, the full list of names, Amy Kramer, Ali Akbar, every person is involved with this stuff. And so I thought it was interesting that those things were moving in concert together, because as that information comes out, the Capitol Police officers theoretically could use that to boost their case. And they're also kind of trailing the case by Eric Swalwell and Bernie Thompson. We'll see how that goes, but it's significant. I mean, the Capitol Police officers, you have that happening. You have, Fanone and Dunn continuing to speak out. You had the officer today sitting down with Lester Holt, who shot Ashley Babbitt, telling his side of the story, because apparently things have gotten so miserable for him. The Trumpers, his name has been floating around the internet for months. The name that was out was the correct one. And he just wanted to say, I followed my training. And I went, I had never watched the tape until today because I didn't want to watch it. It's pretty cut and dry. I mean, they break the windows, 2 men hoist her up. She's trying to climb through the glass into the speaker's lobby. I mean, literally, this guy is the only guy standing between them and members of Congress behind there. And this gun just comes in the frame. It's a single shot into her shoulder. She goes down. Another person comes, gives her medical assistance. I mean, I watched it and I just was struck with how disciplined he was. I mean, it was 1 shot to his shoulder. She did die from the injuries, but it wasn't, I guess, a kill shot. I'm not trying to spin it. But in those circumstances, I don't know. I don't think he's going to help himself make his life better by doing this interview, but I think they're desperate for support, which is
It's amazing. We finally found a police shooting that conservatives are upset about. Yay! I knew that if we looked hard enough, we'd be able to find cops killing somebody, and eventually conservatives would say, oh, this is terrible. But
the union is not supporting him in this case.
Right, but the union,
so there's the fun twist.
Exactly. Only the president. So, Tim, what do you got? What do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about the Nirvana baby?
No, we're talking about Afghanistan. I don't like the shtick. I appreciate, but 13 Americans died today. I just have to say, look, we only have, our numbers are dropping. The people who send you the nastygrams, they're either not here or they're here just to pick on us, which is fine. I like people who come to pick on us. We're just among the family here. And I gotta say, I'm really kind of disappointed and a little bit upset about, and we can talk about the merits of the Afghan stuff in a minute, but I'm a little bit upset about the pretty callous response today, I think, from our new friends on the left. And I think that the president's speech was perfectly fine. I did not think that.
What's a callous response you're talking about?
Yeah, I'll get to it. Yeah. I don't think that he should have picked the fight with the little Deucey spawn. I don't know that today was the right day for doing that, but I think his actual remarks before the Q&A were perfectly appropriate. But the minimizing this, the saying that like anybody else that wants to be warmongers, the circling the wagons around all the around the defense of it, getting really mad at any media members. And Clarissa Ward was in Kabul, risking her life trying to report about what was happening. She's getting swarmed. All of these other people getting swarmed. I mean, I understand that we've gotten to a place where everything feels life and death, or like your side or the other side has to win, in order to win each news cycle. But I don't. There's never any equivalence to what is happening on the right. But I worry that this mindset, that there's an own the cons mindset that comes into place, where it's like we cannot just take a moment to reflect on what happened and to say that like this is horrible. And it doesn't mean you have to say, oh, this is all Joe Biden's fault or all this is whoever's fault, but like it's somebody's fault, right? It's somebody's fault. Like it was not inevitable that it had to be as bad as it's been, and it's going to be. And it's only August 26th. I looked at the clock today, and I was like, when's August 31st again? And it's 5 more days. I mean, there's clearly going to be more bad things happening, and there has to be accountability for this. I think that the article that Ben and Shay wrote about that today was right on, and I think that like just the immediate just impulse that we have to circle the wagons and insult everybody that wants to try to figure out what we can learn from this and how we can make sure, make the best of this a horrible situation. It's been pretty dispiriting.
But what do you think accountability looks like? I mean, because to me, I think, we know what happened. It was a terribly executed, abrupt withdrawal. And for months, people sat on visa applications. I don't know why they didn't get them out. But to me, this is such a bigger problem that, goes back to the Afghanistan papers and that was written by the Washington Post. Like, I want to audit the Pentagon. Like, how long were we sitting on this ghost army that never existed? I mean, those are the questions I want answered. I mean, it didn't really start with Biden. Of course, he's holding the bag on it now. But how long did this go on? I mean, it's from Bush to Obama to like,
Sure, we should look at all that. But look, I mean, after the Bay of Pigs, Kennedy, I don't know if this is apocryphal or true, like looked at Dulles and said, if we lived in Europe, I'd be fired right now, but we don't. We're in America, so you're fired, right? Like, there has to be accountability. And I don't know. I don't just mean like he should just scalp Tony Blinken or whoever, Milley or whoever, just for the sake of it. But like, like what they were saying was going to happen in July was completely wrong. And then once it became clear it was completely wrong, they didn't do anything to change course. Like, the Taliban's gaining city after city. It's 4 days. And like, there was no expedited effort to get people out those sides. I understand that fucking asshole Ghani screwed Biden. I totally get that. But like, that was in July. Like, there was still 3 weeks between then and August. It did not have to be as bad as the place that we're in right now, and like acting like it did is crazy. It's crazy talk.
So I want to say that I understand the impulse to want to own the cons on this. I saw it's like two data points on this. I got a text from a buddy of mine today who is staying with his super MAGA parents. And his super MAGA dad has had Fox on all day long and has been saying, I knew it. I knew Biden would do this. This is, if we had reelected Trump, we'd still be in Afghanistan fighting. And he would never have pulled out of Afghanistan. And if he did pull out of Afghanistan, he would have brought every single one of our allies, which is of course crazy because the Trump plan was to pull out in May. And he had his little golem, Stephen Miller, at all the meetings preventing any movement on the special immigrant visas. Like the Trump position was the exact opposite of this, but everything's been retconned. And so of course you would want to own people like that. There was a conservative website ran a piece yesterday indignant that this shows that Joe Biden's word can never be taken seriously. His word as a man is meaningless. This from the same website that has been like, look, I know Donald Trump, like he expresses himself in interesting ways and he's kind of a scamp. I'm sure he's not helpful, but you got to take him seriously, not literally, and you see that sort of shit, and you why don't you want to own those people, right? And we live in this era of dominance politics where admitting any mistake, holding
Can I add on
anybody
top
in
to that, by the way?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just so it's our people. I mean, I was a child, so I know all the MAGAs like to attack me with this. I was not, actually the one that decided that we should go to war in Iraq. But like, yeah, I mean, in addition to the Fox people and all the assholes making excuses for Trump, right? Like the reason that Biden was stuck with the bag on this was because of shit that happened fucking 12 years ago that he was against.
Yes.
For the most part,
Yes.
right? So like, I get it. I get it too.
I get that. But what I'm saying is we also live in this era of dominance politics where admitting any mistake, holding anybody in your team accountable is just, we haven't done that here at all, right? In America. When's the last time you saw the president of the United States being like, "Yep, my bad. I'm going to fire that guy. We never should have done that." That we have not had that since Bill Clinton, maybe. Right?
I was a child. I can't even remember what time.
So
Rummy got pushed out.
Yeah, eventually, right?
Eventually.
Yeah, I mean, they're
6
not going
years
to
in
fight.
or
I mean, they wouldn't
something.
even fire
Rummy.
anybody in the middle of this right now anyway. It's just.
But Rummy got pushed out over the election, right? Wasn't it over the loss of the election? I don't think it was over Iraq. I think it was because they lost the midterms because of Iraq. That's when Rummy got pushed out.
So I get those impulses. And yet, whenever I get an email from somebody, you neocon warmonger, I just canceled my subscription because you people just showed that all you just want your forever wars. You want to beat up on Joe Biden. The first chance you got. I'm just like, dude, I don't know what fucking website you've been reading, but like we're in this to save the republic and the democracy, and to do that, you need a pro-democracy party that's really strong politically and doing popular things and governing well. The point of this is not because we want to, man, it's time to give the Biden guys a wedgie. We always hated them. Like, that's not what's going on here. And, and when I look at this stuff, I know people don't want to talk about the specifics, which is why I've been like mostly focusing on how to help refugees and, control the things we can control in our own backyards. But when I look at pieces, Ezra Klein has a piece in the New York Times alibying Biden today, which is the most ridiculous piece of horse shit I've read in years. And the impulse,
the mafia's back together. Iglesias' Twitter feed is a massive alibi of him too. It's like, that a hospital got bombed last year too.
And I look at that and I just think, I don't know who you guys think you're helping, but I don't think it's the Biden administration. Right. The answer to this is not to just like, unless, of course, maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe the answer is to just brazen it out. Maybe that's what American politics is these days. And the voters don't care. And that 3 months from now, they'll be on to the next thing. And I don't know I find this is why the whole thing is so depressing that for not only what is happening in the real world there, but what it says about us as a people, man.
That's why you're moving to comedy. It's just kind of like
that's why I've been spending a lot of time on the mat with Dennis Morton. Honestly,
Amanda, are we being too hard on?
No, you're not. It's just, when I know it's going to be a bad day like this, when people are just fighting, trying to own each other, I tune out. Like I don't get invested into it because it makes me even more upset to watch people engage in stuff that's so shallow and dumb and non-helpful. I just wait it out. And so I've watched the speech today. I've obviously been keeping an eye on CNN. It's all terrible. But that's, I don't really know these stats you're talking about because I tune out for them because they're so non-productive and it makes me sad. And we'll have better points to make when people have calmed down a bit because this is such a deep systematic problem. Joe Biden didn't do a good job. But there's a lot of other people that didn't do a good job along the way. That's how I feel.
I am jealous of you that you are able to tune this out. It is not in my constitution as much as I want to do it. I'm incapable. I'm an addict. I'm just an unsavable addict.
No, on news days like this, just watch the TV.
I have to look at Josh Hawley calling for Joe Biden to resign after he sent out a press release in May demanding that Joe Biden take out the troops quicker. It's like, how do you think shit would have gone in May? How do you think shit would have gone in May, Josh? Just same deal, but worse, obviously. Fewer people get out, but this it's just having to. That's baked in for me. I guess that's the point that I was trying to make at the beginning of this. Like, it's baked in for me that those guys are assholes, and I walked away from it because that they're assholes, and I do get frustrated when I see people that I think are trying to act that I thought were trying to act in good faith, like really making similarly disingenuous arguments about the nature of what's happened over the course of last week, and in fact, these guys died. And this the other thing is, we're hearing directly, like from folks in the military, and obviously Bill it has a lot of deep relationships in the military, and so almost all of us do, and like the people that are in the military are pissed. The Biden supporters in the military.
Biden supporters in the military.
The Biden
Yes.
supporters, not the MAGA fucks that go on Fox. The Biden supporters in the military are upset. They feel let down. They want to do more. And that was like my biggest takeaway from the last week or two. Like they want to get more people out. Like they want to put themselves at risk. Like those 13 folks that died today, I don't know any of them personally, and obviously, just I'm thinking about their families. So I don't know if this is true for every one of them, but generally speaking, the people that are a part of that mission wanted to do as much as possible and put themselves at risk. And like, we should be honoring that.
Well, and this is, I mean, my God, if you're in the military, this is the kind of operation that you signed up for the most, right? This is not going out and killing people. This is not
a humanitarian mission.
This is the most fulfilling and noble thing that you can do as a soldier, is going in and trying to help people. So I don't know. It's bad. Listen, we're at the very end, and I want to end with a palate cleanser. So before we go, can we talk about the Nirvana Baby lawsuit? Tim, now you were probably in first grade.
I have a contrarian take for
Nevermind
this.
Came out.
Yeah, it was Nevermind was a little before my time. I did not hit the grunge era. But I did like it. Okay, Smells Like Teen Spirit is good. I probably was coming around the time when they were getting lame and doing the unplugged MTV version. That was really more my scene. He's obviously very handsome.
Did you say Smells Like Teen Spirit is fine? Is that what you?
I mean, that's pretty good. That's a good track. That's a good track, I think.
I mean, it's like the Pulp
Rape
Fiction
Me.
of
Rape Me is
music.
a little bit on, like, you Rape Me hit you over the head a little bit, but after a few whiskeys, you can bang your head to that song.
It's only the most influential album of the last 40 years, but sure,
really, really good.
Fine.
Really, that's fine. It's really, really good. You're right. My contrarian take about this is not about Nirvana themselves, who, like I say, are fine, are really fine, quite fine. Is I think he could win.
I think he should win. I always felt violated having to look at that in the stores. It was always weird. And I didn't listen to Nirvana. I listened to country 98 FM radio.
How his little penis was out. I really didn't notice before. I didn't look at
I always thought it was weird and wrong.
I just looked at it kind of a little bit, and I think I think he might win.
Do you buy his line about how many times women have broken up with him when they find out that the whole world has seen his junk?
He seems like
I can't have a relationship because I meet these women on the internet, and I tell them as soon as they learn that was me, they just won't be with me. It's humiliating. And I just think to myself, what?
He seems like
what are you talking about? He seems like an insane person.
Like he needs a therapist.
However, he's an artist, and so maybe this entire lawsuit is itself a performance piece.
No, babies can't consent. No.
No.
I think he could use yoga. I think he could get on the mat with you, and that is something that could help him. He has a tattoo about being the Nirvana baby. I mean,
I believe he has a tattoo that says "Nevermind" across his chest.
Yeah,
that's how
how
sad he is about it.
He seems like he needs a little help. He does, and I feel I hope that he finds some help. And why not win? Kirk's dead, so I mean, the other guys can afford it. Like, throw him a few bucks.
I hope he does not get 1 red cent of Dave Grohl's money. That's what I hope. There
was a great viral clip of Grohl as the final palate cleanser where the Westboro people were protesting outside their concert recently, and they got on the back of a pickup truck and played them a few tunes, and drove out there to play to them, and Dave started shouting at them about how they just need to love one another, and how they just just sort of need to commune with the music. It's a really good viral clip. I recommend you watching if you need a little
Did he
uplift.
win them over?
I don't think so, but there was no like interviews. There was no after action report with the Westboro crowd. So not sure.
Oh, that's great. Hey guys, thanks for coming out with us. Amanda, Tim, thanks for this. Everybody who came and stayed even after Ja Rule's split, that was really cool of you. We appreciate it. Everyone have a good week. We will see you next week. Bye.
Peace. I'm on Charlie's pod tomorrow, and I'm probably gonna say the same things I said tonight. So still
Something
down.
will happen overnight.
Don't tell them. Still
Yeah,
down.
Matt Walsh will say something.
Thanks, Dave.